Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Pursuit of Progress podcast, where we explore real estate, self improvement, and just how to get better every single day. As always, you guys, this is Adam Lang here, and I'm back with a solo episode. Ben's been real busy this past couple weeks traveling and doing a lot of stuff with work as well as family time. So, doing a quick kind of a motivational type podcast today, quick and dirty one for you. And it's all about speed over perfection. So, we're going to be talking about one of the most dangerous traps for entrepreneurs and high performers, and that is this idea of perfectionism. This episode today, it's going to be about why the speed of execution always wins, how to build momentum by doing, and why the word done will always beat perfect. Just getting it done. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of GSD. That's an acronym that I used to always really enjoy just for the mentality of it, which is get shit done. So this is kind of an example of that today. And again, why more importantly, it's speed over perfection. So with all that being said, you guys, let's jump right into it. I'm going to be sharing with you 4 points that I've put together today just to really hit this point close to home for hopefully a lot of you. And before I kind of go through these 4 points, just a quick shout out. If you guys have any feedback from any of these episodes, maybe you'd even like to be a guest on a future episode, shoot me a message on social media, or you could just give me a quick email. It's adam@adamsellsdenver.com. And I would love the opportunity to hopefully connect with you guys and have you on the show. We really want to focus over the next 12 months or so, having a lot more guests on and just really figuring out new ways to provide even more value to you, our trusty and very appreciated audience of the show. So jumping right into point number 1, all again about speed over perfection. So point number 1 is perfection is really a form of procrastination. All right, so let's dive into what I exactly mean by this. So perfectionism is often disguised as how would I rephrase this? Perfectionism is often disguised as productivity, but really it's the fear that's into the fancy outfit. So what I mean by this is the reason that most people wait is because they're afraid. They're afraid of judgment. Maybe they're afraid of just looking dumb, or they're afraid that they're not going to get it right. But you don't get clarity by thinking. You get clarity by doing. Every successful entrepreneur I know, including some of my favorites right now, like Dan Martell, Andy Frisella, one thing they all have in common is they move fast. They ship. Then they adjust, and then they improve. What's most important is just taking that step forward and learning through that process. You don't learn to ride a bike by reading a manual. You learn by getting on, and I think the key here is you learn by falling off. Those mini failures, or sometimes big failures, that is where the growth comes from. That is where you learn the most. And any successful person that I've ever met, they've had more failures than they've had successes, and those failures often get overlooked by their successes. So just ask yourself this, what am I avoiding by trying to get it 100% perfect? So point number 2 is, I like to call this one speed builds momentum. So when you move quickly, you generate feedback. Feedback then creates momentum. Let me say that one more time. When you move quickly, you generate feedback. Feedback is what then creates that momentum. Momentum, it builds confidence, and confidence then creates belief. That's the cycle. Let me say that one last time just to really hit it home 3 times, and hopefully you'll memorize it, or at least it'll stick a little bit more. When you move quickly, you generate feedback. That feedback then creates momentum. That momentum builds confidence, and that confidence is what creates belief. That's the cycle. So perfectionism, it kills that cycle before it can even begin. And that's this whole point of why we don't want anything necessarily to be perfect. If you want to feel motivated, just take fast action. That's the most important part here. I'll use a quick example for you guys. So Ben, my co-host, and I, we've been doing monthly webinars. We're calling them our real estate home buyer masterclasses, and just a way to provide value to our sphere of potential customers, family, friends, really just anybody that has a goal of buying a house in the next 12 to 24 months. And we're really diving deep into these webinars right now. When I launched my first webinar, it was not pretty. The slides were very basic. The branding wasn't really on point. The automations weren't really how they were supposed to be, with follow-up texts and emails, all that kind of stuff. But guess what? I launched anyways. And you know what? It worked. We adjust little things each week. Every time we do a webinar, we have a little post-webinar powwow between the two of us. We talk about what worked really well, maybe what could have used some improvement, and we make that 1% improvement for the next one. It's these little micro adjustments each week. That's what really helps create this well-oiled machine. And if you don't do that, you're just going to be repeating yourself week after week, month after month. But I think the key also on this webinar example is that none of this would have happened if I waited until the webinar was perfect, until it looked ready. You got to be a little dirty at first. You got to just put it out there and see how the market responds. And sometimes you don't even understand or know or predict how the market's going to respond until you put it out there. Something that you thought was going to be completely overlooked and not even that big of a part of the presentation might be what the biggest takeaway was for a lot of people. So just so important just to take that step forward and just make it out, put it out there, make it, release it, whatever it is that you're working on. Don't wait for it to be perfect. Another way to look at this is to launch ugly and then improve later. So anyways, call to action on this one for you guys. Just what takeaway, think of that one project that you might be sitting on right now, something that you're maybe a little bit just worried about putting out into, the public space. It's okay if it's imperfect. Start anyways. Put it out there. So my third point, again, there's 4 points. This is the third one. I want to talk a little bit about perfection and how it doesn't scale. What actually scales are systems. So trying to perfect everything yourself is a complete bottleneck. And I'm saying this also from experience. It slows everything down. The better model is really just to launch something small, see how it works, and then bring in the right people to improve or to scale it. If you guys listened to last week's episode, I talked about how the best, most successful entrepreneurs, business people, just everybody in the world that is at the top of their game, they didn't get there by themselves. They incorporated people around them and helped, these other people helped lift them up to where they wanted to get to. So same here, you need to find other people out there and hopefully, get a little bit of assistance here and just realize that it's not going to be something you're going to do by yourself. So talk a little bit more about this. Trying to perfect everything is that bottleneck. It slows everything down. The better model here is just to launch something small, see how it works, and then bring in the right people, like I said, just to improve or to scale it. Speed wins when you back it up with systems. So there's a way to look at this. Don't waste 6 months obsessing over like a landing page on your website. Just launch it in 6 hours instead of 6 months and improve it over time with data. That's the only way that you can really know truthfully how something is going to get better is by getting that feedback and then making those improvements. Start messy, stay consistent, and just improve with every single rep. So a takeaway for this one for you guys is to just audit maybe one area of your life or your business where you're feeling stuck in that perfection loop. How can you build a simple system instead that might, in the long run, be what you need to take this to the next level? And then last but not least, the fourth point, done creates data. Data creates direction. Done creates data. Data creates direction. So you can't optimize something that doesn't exist. Done, it gives you something to measure, gives you something to test, and it gives you something to improve. Perfect, however, it just lives in this kind of distant, theoretical type state. So perfect is really never going to be the case. You even look at people like Michael Jordan. What did he say after he won one of his championships? He said, man, I missed, 6 shots, or I missed this last layup, or whatever it may be. He, even at the top of the game, celebrating a massive win like a championship, and he's still thinking about some of the mistakes he made. Using this as an example, just to highlight the point that nothing is ever going to be perfect. Even people that are in the top 1% of their industry, even at that level of execution, they're still not perfect. We need action in the real world if we want real results. Every win you've ever had came from action, not theory. So, version 1 is always better than version none. And I think that should be the quote of the entire episode today. Version 1 is better than version none. So the call to action on this one, a takeaway for you guys, is just give yourself permission to move forward and not worry about what other people are going to say, what other people are going to think. Just don't worry about that. Let your ego take a back seat and realize that this is actually going to be the best thing that you've done by just putting it out there. I'll kind of leave you guys with this. There's something known as the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule. And that talks about how, 80% of the results come from 20% of the effort. And same exact topic here as what we're talking about is, you're never going to figure out what that 20% is that takes up and gives you 80% of the results. You're never going to find out what truly is that 20% until you put it out in the world and start testing different things and getting that feedback. And from that feedback, being able to then make those 1% improvements every single time. And over the course of a week, a month, a year, however long it may take, you're going to be amazed at how dialed in whatever it is that you're working on. So I think this one is just a quick episode just to put this out there for you guys, because this is something that I've been dealing with a lot over the last year. And it's also something that as I've gotten better at it, I've been really rewarded by just this understanding of how, yes, putting other people in charge of aspects of this different, stuff that I'm doing with my marketing and real estate career. It's okay to lean on others to help do some of these things. And the biggest thing of all of this is just doing it. Just, again, version 1 is better than version none. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode today. If you guys could just do one last thing for me, if you got any value out of this episode or any of the episodes that we're putting out on a weekly basis, share it with a friend. The only way we're going to grow our episodes, grow our audience, grow the show is just having more organic growth through word of mouth and just having our audience share this with other people that we get value from them. So if you guys could, please do that for us this week. And with that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week, and catch you on the next episode of the Pursuit of Progress podcast on all major podcast platforms, coming out with new episodes every single Friday. Hope you have a good one. I'll see you next week. Bye.